According to the inner city press, this is the precise testimony given in a federal courtroom during the Sean Diddy Combs trial. After decades of rumors, suspicions, and relentless industry retaliation, Wendy Williams, the queen of hot subjects, and the person they attempted to silence, is now taking the stand in federal court in a startling turn of events that none saw coming. We strongly warn viewers to exercise caution before we start. Her evidence covers a range of topics, including systemic abuse, silence, and protection in hip-hop and entertainment from Jay-Z to R. Kelly. From it didn't feel like a celebrity appearance. When Wendy Williams walked into the courtroom, rather it felt like the arrival of someone who had been buried alive and had to claw her way out in order to finally speak the truth. She was there because the business as a whole been on edge for years, not for the drama or the headlines. She brought scary recollections, quotations, and dates. Everyone listened to her shocking deposition under oath regarding DJ Jay-Z and their twisted relationship, which was not a tabloid feature. She took a seat, faced the jury, and steadily but methodically adjusted her microphone. I was early. I was never sloppy. I was never resentful, and I never lied. Wendy didn't waste any time in reminding the court of her reasons for testifying under oath regarding the patterns, cover-ups, threats, and actions she had long accused Sean Diddy Combs of planning. When I first started talking about Diddy, she stated, I wasn't trying to tear him down, I was trying to wake up people. An hour later, she described instances in which station managers warned her, advertisers pulled out of her show, and threats were made in subtle but unmistakable ways. You say you're going, Wendy. The courtroom watched as she laid out a stack of documents in front of her, including printouts of old show transcripts, emails from executives, and a timeline of everything Diddy allegedly did to shut her down. She began in the early 2000s. He was protected. Everything. Di knew it. You couldn't puff about Puff without a phone call coming later. Wendy, I'm hurt. I would lose a sponsor, a syndication contract, or a network invite every time I disclosed. Something about Diddy, from his parties to the way he handled his artists, but she would not back down. You can threaten me and blackball me, but you can't make me disappear. I hope they're paying attention now that I'm sworn in because I'm telling the truth. She also talked about how a girl gang that was purportedly sent by Diddy himself physically pushed her out of her radio station. That is coordination, not coincidence. Halting until their mechanism is sufficiently disrupted by the truth. Wendy looked to someone else when the prosecution questioned her about the culture around Diddy. Her tone intensified as she reiterated her long-standing warning to the public about Jay-Z. It would be impossible to discuss Diddy's actions without mentioning the individuals who stood with him and shared his smiles during the abuse. Wendy leaned in after looking around the jury. She referenced lines from Foxy's debut album, including one that allegedly claimed, "Ain't no num got, the one I got no one can be." You remember Foxy Brown? She was 15 years old, Jay-Z was 27, and he was everywhere with her. Better. The audience flinched as she read aloud with purpose. You tell me, she continued, why was a grown man composing those lyrics for a child? Then Wendy released something even darker, an alleged tape. For years, there was a rumor that there was a tape between Jay-Z Fox and Jay-Z Fox, but you never heard about it again. She continued by explaining that only someone in the industry was aware of the rumors that Jay picked Foxy up at school with expensive gifts, shopping sprees, and hair appointments paid for by a man almost twice her age. The prosecution then asked if she had any concrete evidence, such as emails and calls to the producers who backed out of my show when I brought up Jay's name. Wendy claimed to be from her highly regarded radio show shortly after suggesting that Jay-Z's relationships with underage girls needed to be investigated, calling me toxic. But now you're seeing that everything I asked was worthwhile, she told the court that Jay-Z's team made covert calls to industry insiders to blacklist anyone who spoke about Foxy, which, referring to the infamous freak-offs, a word that is now essential to the federal case against Diddy, the villain remarked, I was the first to say it. Those weren't parties, they were operations. She then turned to the jurors and asked, you think I lost my T-spawns messy? Then came what Wendy referred to as the bit that no one wanted to accept. the part that led to her being dubbed a loudmouth, a liar, and worse, telling the court, "I was the first to say it," or Bernowski number. I lost sponsors because I was right, and they couldn't let that spread. It wasn't a house party. It was a ritual. She brought up Karen Superhead Steffens, who told Wendy on air that Dottie had asked her to attend one of these parties and requested male participation. Superhead didn't mince words. She detailed everything, including Dottie's drug use, paranoia, and odd setups, and that he was scared she would expose him. Wendy leaned in once more, and I played that interview over and over because the truth was too heavy for her to forget. The court was shocked one by one as these events matched the very patterns described by Casey. Ventura Gan deal. Wendy testified that she had personally spoken with 3 people who described IV bags being used to recover from the party, just as the court indictment now details. They said that there was medical assistance on standby. Standby, this was not socializing, this was organized depravity. The guests, both men and women who had attended Dottie's parties and returned shaken, were told to simply party and were told what to do, what to wear, who to touch, and which room to enter. Your eyes never leave the jury. I said it on air as a joke, but it wasn't. They actually found over 1,000 bottles. Wendy Williams turned to Casey Ventura, someone else she had been defending for years, as the courtroom became more silent. "You know," I said, because I was the only one who was willing to share what others had told me. The mogul's lifestyle and the pull of the private security industry made it nearly impossible for Cassie to leave. I said it then, and I'll say it now. She didn't need a boyfriend, she needed a bodyguard. Wendy testified that she had tried to warn her listeners as early as 2008 about the obsessive control that the mogul allegedly had over Cassie when she was 19 and he was approaching 40. That's love. Love, that's leverage. She reminded the courtroom of a clip she played on her show years ago that showed her looking down during an interview. I was told that Wendy had access to her phones and that he would show up at hotels without warning, asking staff to unlock her doors. She paused, and when I said that out loud, my show sponsors pulled the plug. The prosecution then presented a timeline of Wendy's broadcast that mirrored Cassie's legal claims. Wendy then brought up a 2018 incident in which Cassie allegedly ended the relationship after Dylan forced his way into her home. Claiming it wasn't the first time he showed up without permission, she explained to the court how these mogul dynamics operate, grooming, isolating, utilizing industrial power, and fabricating the image of luxury as a means of achieving her goals. She wants control, doesn't require permission, and makes the world work for them. Cassie was his property, not just his affection, and she became dangerous when she broke the chain. I saw the sign lawsuit, I said it publicly, and now she's finally hearing. But at what cost? Wendy asked as she wrapped up this section of her testimony. Slowed but did not shudder. She testified that in 2004, at the height of her radio dominance, a record label executive told her to stop talking about Puff or else she would be removed from her afternoon time slot. You don't get to talk about men like Diddy and walk away. Clean. I knew that, but I didn't realize how deep it would go until it happened. They said it was punishment the very next week. Without even pretending it wasn't about him, they were cautioned by the networks to avoid Wendy. She also recounted how the girl group Total almost attacked her in front of her own studio after Shem, labeled and washed up and broke on air, and you think they just showed there randomly. She also recalled one program director telling her bluntly, "You went too far. You poked it a wrong bear." Wendy vividly recalled the event, which included her intern in a panic, her boyfriend at the time waiting in a car, and admirers jammed against the glass of the radio station entrance. It was a message we could deliver to you, not just a confrontation. She displayed written emails from public relations companies that, at the time, represented Bad Boy, all of which disassociated themselves from her platform. Wendy Williams held up the page and said, "This comes from A.A. Combs." One of the emails said, "Per client instruction, we will no longer be booking talent on Wendy Williams' show." I wasn't the first to be blackballed, Shay added, but I was one of the few who stayed loud about it. Dottie described how she lost an advertising deal, was kicked out of bet events, and was denied media passes. Everything was prearranged. Even back then, we knew what not to say if we wanted to keep our jobs. And I had Charlemagne on the air with me. She clarified that there was a covert but undeniable attempt in the early 2000s to shield some celebrities by disgracefully exposing their detractors. You lose everything if you talk, including your name and microphone, but I didn't fold. We come from a highly homosexual era of hip-hop, so I remained motionless for a bit before narrating a period of time that seemed almost unbelievable in hindsight. The Wendy Williams Experience, a book published in 2004, was full of coded references and subliminal warnings regarding Dottie Jay-Z and their after dark lifestyles. Previously referred to as rumor, the government now refers to it as evidence. She went on to talk about an interview she did in 2009 with Mark Curry, a former bad boy who had recently released Dancing with the Devil. I nodded, and that interview suddenly disappeared from the archives of the radio station. She informed the court that she had received blowback emails, threats, and FCC action each time she tried to add someone who was skeptical of the industry pact, such as Gene Deal or Jaguar Wright. She went on to disclose something that the court was interested in: a list of persons you couldn't discuss that wasn't documented, but that everyone in the business was aware of. I got paid when I broke that rule. She clarified that executives had cautioned her off the record to back down, stating that I was going to ruin everything for them and for me, and that her hot subject segments were constantly being flagged for review. She also claimed that talent representatives were threatening show producers. She hesitated, but everything is messed up now that the truth is out. This trial is not beginning, it's the end of a cover-up, she continued, looking back at the courtroom. I want the jury to know that I've been sounding this alarm for 20 years. You all just finally heard it. Wendy's tone shifted once more, becoming more acerbic and precise. She looked directly into the jury's eyes and said, "You think it is just about Diddy, but you're wrong. This is about the ecosystem that protected him, which includes names you were never supposed to hear in a courtroom," she said. "I had sources who were actually producers' agents, and they told me straight out, Wendy, your name is being passed around and they don't want you touching certain topics because you're being labeled unstable." Wendy explained the fallout from her controversial radio segments, in which she revealed not only Diddy's parties and manipulation, but also how Tyler Perry allegedly blackballed her behind closed doors. One you'll never see, one you'll never hold, but it's real. If you do, you disappear. She added that after her split with the Precious Teen movie, both Perry and Oprah were heavily. Then came a terrifying story. Wendy testified that she had once privately confided in Oprah about her own past trauma with abuse, and she told me that she respected me and would never exploit that story. The next thing I knew, my abuser was on her show being interviewed while I was being blackballed, and she continued, "That wasn't just betrayal. That was retaliation the jury looked at. I was kicked off the guest list after an executive told me that Oprah's people don't want you near here anymore. That's power. Managing optics, Wendy Puff Tyler," was the subject line of an email she had unintentionally received from a public relations firm that handled crisis communication for both Perry's studio and a Bad Boy affiliated brand. But that was all she needed, so she looked straight ahead as Wendy spilled the beans and they stood next to him, took pictures and smiled with him while the rest of us were being crushed for speaking out. I can understand why. Prosecutors later described this as a turning point when Wendy pulled out a thick file folder and began reading from an NDAA dated 2007. The name was redacted, the language was ominous, and the subject agreed not to reveal any private gatherings or recordings, and explained that tapping the cover revealed a collection of NDA email threads and internal memos that were never supposed to be seen, explaining that she got them from industry friends who had long since left the game and were tired of seeing the truth labeled as gossip. "We have prepared the presidential suite with all requested amenities, including extra linens, candlelight lighting, and discretion measures," she read in an internal email from a chain of exclusive hotels. If you thought this was just celebrity partying, Wendy asked for the number. Interactions with Shah Combs, his guests or associates, could result in financial penalties and public retaliation. Mr. Combs' assistant will arrive for setup prior to guest entry. The email date was 2015, and Casey was still with Dottie. Prosecutors presented the jury with a photo of Dylan Tyler Perry, a media consultant known for her crisis sweep services, and Dylan standing together at a 2019 gala event. both of them smiling, and Wendy said, smiling while women were getting paid to shut up and others were being destroyed for not signing. She later clarified that she had evidence of payments made to publicists, talent managers, and even bloggers who were controlling the narrative. She told the court that she had also been offered an NDA and wanted to shut down. You see Diddy on trial, Wendy Williams stated in a cool-headed voice. But I see something much bigger. Rather than breaking or crying, she sat with the weight of 2 decades of warning the world and being ignored when she reached the last part of her testimony. This isn't just about what he did, it's about who allowed him to do it. I was promised that I might have a syndicated television deal if I agreed to stop covering the subjects I was. But I refused, and I paid the price. She pointed to the defense table and said, you see one man, but behind him is a legacy of silence. A tower built on fear, on DAs, power plays, party invitations, and billion-dollar handshakes. She then turned to the jury and reminded them that although Daisy was the one who accused Jay-Z, Perry, and Oprah, the handlers had been sitting quietly for years, some of them even having seen the abuse firsthand. And they shook his hand, took his checks, and ensured that anyone who asked questions was pushed out the door. You thought I was gone, but now you sit where the truth finally caught up to you, and I hope it's loud before stepping down, she said, turning back to the gallery. This trial is not the end. It's the beginning of people finally naming names, of the walls cracking, and of the entire tower one day falling down, she said, abruptly turning to face Daisy, who had remained largely stoic throughout her testimony. I would rather be right in hell than be silent in heaven, she said immediately.